Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of System Link for Wednesday, the 2nd of April, 2025. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Mike Hazelton from the Xbox Guide. Mike, we have a jam-packed Switch 2 dedicated show to talk through this evening. How are we doing?
Yeah, not too bad. Been waiting a while for this one.
And
Gonna
it's
be
been a
good, I
minute
think.
since we've been able to System Link. Some life, some
Yeah.
dad responsibilities, some unfortunate illness has gotten in the way. So, but we're back and ready to unpack today's Nintendo Direct, their Switch 2 presentation, which follows their initial reveal earlier this year. We got a deep dive on, felt pretty comprehensive. It covered everything from technical specs to launch titles to third-party partners to some surprises, getting news of upgrades to certain games as well, the return of GameCube Switch Online. Yeah, dreams come true. And everything in between, everything from SD card sizes to onboard storage to how they're handling game share and obviously their new C button. We've got the reveal on what that is now as well. So we figured we'd sort of kick things off tonight. Oh, Big Manny, good evening. Good to see you in chat. We thought we'd kick things off tonight with just the hardware itself. We'd seen from the initial reveal that it was very much an iterative console. They'd kept largely the same form factor with it being slightly bigger. We've had obviously confirmation now of some technical specs, which I thought we could go through now. The big thing I think that was really interesting actually was how much time they spent in this talking about technical specs. That really surprised me. I didn't think we'd get quite the deep dive in terms of its screen resolution and output. I don't remember that being confirmed in the original Switch reveal for the first one.
Yeah, I feel like maybe it was more because they didn't have that much, like because it's iterative. All they've got the which will obviously get to the new stuff, but they've got the C button and they've got the mice, but otherwise it's very small enhancements. So I think they had room to talk about some of that stuff, but it was also very basic. Probably not basic for the average Switch audience, but compared to the PS5 Pro reveal or something, like it was
right.
It was talking about 1080p instead of the next level of kind of depth you could get into with technical specs. I still don't think we know particularly what's inside it. I'm sure we'll get that. Maybe it's been released now, but it was kind of at the top level of info.
Yes, I think a couple of big surprises for me were not an OLED screen after they'd iterated on that with the previous Switch. It was just a standard LCD display, but that they support HDR. There was a couple of sort of swings another way, which I never expected Nintendo to care about.
Well, they have to have a HDR in now, surely, in this day and
yeah,
age.
but that's what a reasonable person would assume. I don't think you could have reasonably assumed Nintendo would do that. The fact that they've got capacity for the screen to support up to 120 frames, I think was quite surprising. It was interesting too, seeing when you got to the Metroid Prime 4 Beyond Switch 2 version, where they showed specifically the technical specs on the screen, the confirming that quality mode was going to be outputting in 4K 60 was really nice to see. I mean, whether there's a checkerboard or upscaling solution they use for that, whether it's native or not, but the fact that they confirmed that quality mode was being considered 60 frames per second at that resolution, however, whatever, a version of that appears to be, whatever technology they're using to perhaps upscale that, I highly doubt it's native, but the fact that they were so explicitly stating that quality was 4K 60, performance was 1080p 120, and that they mentioned the difference between docked and undocked, I thought was a really nice clarity and an obvious step up. The fact that they're even showing the menus of you being able to choose the system resolution was a surprise to me. I didn't expect them to go into that very basic level of the weeds, but it was still interesting nonetheless.
But it is a Switch one game, isn't it? So you would expect it to. I mean, I guess 4K, 4K 60 is impressive. But I think if you consider it as a new next generation console for Nintendo, I think you would expect Switch 1 games, if they're available on Switch 2, to run at pretty close. I mean, they should be at 60 FPS, shouldn't they?
Yes.
Whether they're at 4K or 1080, I don't know.
Yeah, and I suppose actually I would actually expect the majority to be 1080p 60. So then it's a similar experience across docked and handheld. But it was just nice to see them actually care about that. The power differential, the fact that actually when you look at a lot of the third-party games were announced, when I'm looking at WWE 2K, 2K NBA, Cyberpunk, Borderlands, Elden Ring. These are demanding games that I wouldn't have expected they even bothered to try and scale down to the original Switch. And I think definitely a concern coming in here was, since we're probably 18 months to 2 years away from next gen arriving, if all those rumours are to be believed for PlayStation and Xbox and whatever they've got cooking next, it didn't. My concern, I think, was that the Switch 2 would just be immediately out of date, that it would just have that problem of then not having any third-party support, or if it did have third-party support, as we've seen the original Switch have, there's been huge number of ports of big high-profile games on there, but they then become the worst versions. They don't run well, they don't look good. And I think just them coming out of the gate and saying that it's 1080p and handheld, and the dock allows it to actually... The dock finally seems a bit more meaningful as well. That was definitely a positive I took away from this, because I don't like you and I are definitely in sync on what a waste of space the plastic HDMI pass-through that the Switch 1 dock is. The fact that they bothered to put the fan in there for cooling, the fact that it outputs 4K, I really think that shows them iterating in a meaningful way on that. And I was really pleased to see them go into that level of detail. Perhaps, as you say, as a way of covering the lack of a huge number of new titles, or at least certainly that they're ready to show at this stage. It's just nice to see them iterating in meaningful ways that I think will matter for people. Just saw at the bottom there, a little bit of an asterisk there, that frame rate is fixed to 60 frames per second at 4K. So there is no option for that to go any higher, which, again, you'd expect. I think that's reasonable for a console platform. Yeah. But it just means that now when games are announced, like seeing Hogwarts Legacy announced for this, which apparently the Switch 1 version is absolute dirge. So to see, and I did have to laugh, and I know you would have done the same thing when Breath of the Wild Enhanced was announced, and I went, and it said something about, with improved frame rates, and I went, also playable frame rates then. It'll actually be usable as a game, as opposed to the...
It was fine, come on.
No, it was not. There's like sub 20 frames in some areas. It was so...
Did you see the reviews?
People can like it and I can't. It's okay to be different. But yeah, it was nice to see that they've actually addressed the power problem. I think that was a big narrative issue that they face with this. Because also, don't forget as well, they are at a point now where they're actually competing with the Steam Deck. They're actually competing with the Asus ROG Ally. There's an Xbox handheld apparently coming this year. That, there's a lot more competition in the handheld space than they had. Vita was dead on its feet. The Wii U obviously had died a death. Xbox weren't putting out a handheld at the time, and the DS was winding down. So the first Switch coming out didn't really have, and there was no Steam Deck. The first Switch didn't really have any competition. So it's interesting. It was interesting to see how much focus they put on technical specs.
Yeah, and I guess it will probably follow the pattern of the first Switch, where there's good third-party support to begin with, and it starts to peter out to the extent that you get like ad hoc stuff coming. That's always a bit of a surprise that it ends up, after the first few years, and then you'll end up getting older games just getting ported to it, as one-off things, and then you'll get to like the point we are now with Switch 1, where there's basically no third-party support in terms of multi-format games that come out on every platform, because the hardware differential's too high. But I think that works for them. It works for them being offset from the other consoles in their release timings.
Yeah,
and they will just plan their first party catalog to kick in when they're anticipating probably third party to drop off a bit.
Absolutely. Just going to chat, Mr. Garrett's Disciple. You best be on Friday. I'll knock at your door. Yes, do not worry. I'm sure our gaming session will be preserved. I'm now vaguely functional, which is good. Big Manny still can't believe it's just Switch 2 and not like the Super Switch or Switch Advanced. Yeah, I really do think they missed a trick with Super Switch. That I saw there was a developer comment about that. They considered it, but because apparently the SNES wasn't backwards compatible, but the Switch 2 is backwards compatible with Switch, they decided that they didn't want to use the Super branding. And I thought that was a really loose justification as to why, because I think that Super Switch would have been a really cool name for this thing. But
I think it would be more that it sounds so iterative if you call it Super Switch. It doesn't sound like a proper sequel. I think that would be the issue. I don't know about back in the day with the SNES, but now I think you'd struggle without having a clear 2 after the name.
Yeah, there has been enough, I think, for me, there was enough iteration on the hardware for it to be a justified upgrade in that sense, I think, across the usability of the Joy-Cons, the magnetic attachment, the addition of 3D audio, the 4K output support, And the fact that there isn't even now a built-in voice chat option. I don't think any of these things are particularly, we can never say, oh wow, they have chat now. There's no sort of way to sort of try to spin that as if it's some revolutionary thing, but it certainly shows them willing to listen and apply criticisms from the first one to the design of the second, and that's been really nice to see.
I think I mostly agree. I think if you've been buying Switch games up until now, you're still buying Switch games, then it will absolutely make sense for you to move over because you want to be able to keep buying them, and the latest games are going to be on the next one. Most of the features, though, other than the mice and the C button, is quite significant. Stuff like the microphone being built in, even the dock and the resolution, and even the hardware capabilities. On other consoles, you do get that stuff as an iterative, literally an iterative PS5 Pro or Xbox One X, rather than a completely new console that you're expecting however many tens of millions of people have got the Switch to all upgrade to, rather than just a niche that these are the people who care about an OLED screen or 4K output. Certainly some of the usability stuff I would have really liked to see earlier. They should have fixed the dock ages ago. They should have fixed the Gammy the stand. They could have put a microphone in it. The Joy-Cons have been shit for a long time. They could have fixed those like after the first couple of years, but it would have been acknowledging a problem with the Joy-Cons. So I'm not a fan of kind of, we've built this thing, it's got obvious problems, let's just ride it out for 6-7 years and then we'll release one that fixes those issues. It would have been nice to have them fixed, especially with the revisions that they did to some of the hardware. But overall, the step up is necessary for it to stay relevant. So
yes,
and I don't think we could expect much more without the price being insane. So
well, exactly, and I think that they keeping it under 400 quid, I think, was a very smart play, and will perhaps be offset by that bundle they mentioned, the 429 bundle with Mario Kart World in it. With any luck, that will sort of help them recoup that. And obviously I think they're clearly making a big push on Switch Online, putting even though they've given a year's grace, they're putting the game chat under that as a requirement, including the game sharing thing as well, but also just the fact that Mario Kart World is obviously going to be so online focused that they're going to be pushing a lot of those subscriptions, I think, for people. That family deal, it was really nice, actually. Something I did appreciate was that the GameCube, and we'll get to it probably later, but the GameCube Switch Online and all of this stuff coming under the existing expansion pack. They're not increasing the price of Switch Online. I think that would have been a huge mistake when you're adding a bunch of additional features that people may or may not actually ultimately care about. To then hike the price from that would have been then, I think, a huge mistake from them. So it's not
interesting,
they were restrained
though.
there.
Interesting though that they are they're behind Switch 2, aren't they? They're not available on Switch 1, whereas obviously they could technically be available on Switch 1.
They could.
It's kind of a move to get people across, which kind of fair enough. You expect that sort of thing from Nintendo, but it's not the sort of thing you would particularly expect from even PlayStation. Now, I think generally where things like that are available, they try to make them available to everyone that's invested in the platform. But I think with Nintendo, you have to kind of expect that stuff.
Let's just go to chats again, a part of the overview, I suppose. Heinke Gamori mentioning, have you seen the price of the physical games? Yeah, very interesting that the digital games are cheaper, which is an interesting flip. And something, actually, I wanted to bring this up now, it's relevant, I think, to this, that I found particularly egregious, is that they're really pushing the game card, the empty game cards, which will prompt a digital download. Rather than a code, it's a physical card that you insert, and then, I don't know whether that's just to appease retailers, that there's something physical to sell there, but essentially it becomes a physical license that requires that to be inserted for the downloaded game to work.
This was undoubtedly the worst bit, because obviously they didn't talk about it during the stream, which you wouldn't particularly expect. I think you would have expected the price during the stream, but they kept that back. But there were some nice things during the stream that you thought, well, this is kind of Nintendo looking to be a bit more modern, a bit more
Hmm.
competitive with Sony and Microsoft, and then they go and do this with the pricing. And it's like we talked a few weeks ago about GTA. Are Rockstar going to be the first ones to push the price up? And it's fucking Nintendo.
Hmm.
It's
Which
crazy
may now
on
have
their
opened the barn
games, which
doors to then them go, we could charge 100 quid for this, you know.
they're games that cost like a tenth of what games on Xbox and PlayStation
Hmm.
cost to make.
I mean, 80. Mario Kart was 80.
Mario Kart is the Mario Kart that's on the Switch one. They've pushed the engine. They've, obviously, the open world stuff looks really good. Fair
Hmm.
enough. Because I when we saw the first trailer, it was just more carts. It was like doesn't look like enough of an upgrade to me. The
Hmm.
open world stuff is enough of an upgrade, but there's no way they've built that from scratch. They've just taken the Switch One game. You can see it in the design of the game,
Yeah,
and
because
yet
the
they've set
physical
this price point.
yeah, the physical Mario Kart World title is 74.99, and then digital is 66.
I would be more willing to pay that for Donkey Kong, which is actually cheaper
Yeah,
because Donkey Kong, although it seems to be built on Odyssey, it's
you've got some really interesting tech stuff
just
going on there, isn't it? So, and just to clarify something that I said earlier, Hein Kikamori said, digital games aren't cheaper, they've just made the physical games more expensive. Yes, I agree. My point there was more that the digital pricing, whatever they've now set it at, is costing less than physical. Yeah, everything's gone up, that's correct, but the differential between them is that the digital copies are actually cheaper now, which was always the
do you,
flip in the Switch 1 era.
do you think this is because most people, probably discerning consumers, will not buy Nintendo games from Nintendo because
Yes,
it's a rip-off? They'll buy
yes.
them from the shops. Setting it £10 higher in the shops will mean it will take a lot longer. Well, the shops have got a lower margin,
Mm.
so well, when when they bring the price down, um, it will take longer to get to the Nintendo digital
Yes.
price, and then you won't have such a because almost on day one you can buy the physical copy and it'll be cheaper than buying it from Nintendo, but that's obviously not the case now. I
No,
don't know why
exactly.
else they would be doing this. There's obviously some cost with selling stuff physically, um, but no one else does this. Again,
I think it's a very calculated move. I think it's to appease people that want a console that supports physical media, which technically they do. They want a console that supports backwards compatibility, which technically they do, but they're pushing, I think, actively to get people into the digital ecosystem, so that then the groundwork is then laid for them to really lay it on thick with their Nintendo account migration, and it's all about your digital library, much like kind of where Xbox is heading. You know, we've had our 360 games still persist forward. You can imagine there is definitely a chance that the next Xbox won't have a disk drive in it. For example, PS5 Pro didn't come on with one as standard. We are heading that way as an industry. What that means for game preservation obviously has huge implications, but I think this is their way of appeasing that while still taking a step towards an all digital future, for sure.
I think it's really dangerous with Nintendo. Letting Nintendo get us into an all digital future is really scary to me because
Well,
of their pricing.
three words:
Um,
Mario All Stars. Right, that collection
yeah,
is the real. It makes me nervous.
and it's I'm not sure. Like they're obviously getting income from the online membership. I think with this move, if they can eliminate physical retail, it's so beneficial because they'll get 100% of everything they sell
Hmm.
of their first party games on their own store instead of having to pay some to bricks and mortar stores and all the stuff that comes with physical. And they get decimated by secondhand sales,
Yes.
quite rightly, because their digital sales are too high. If we get to a point in 5 years, which doesn't seem unrealistic if they're insisting physical games are more expensive, where retailers aren't selling the games anymore because in the UK there's only a few places, limited places you can get new games
Mm.
from. In 5 years, you could see that not even being a thing anymore. Then the only place you will have is the Nintendo digital store, and they can just keep the price
or they
as it is.
or it
You won't have a
becomes that you're
choice.
buying, even if it's like a physical copy and it's like maybe some sort of like, you get like a bonus item with it, like a pre-order bonus that then is sold separately. um that you go through the My Nintendo store. Pre-orders for the Switch itself are going to be going through that first before anywhere else. So I could definitely see a future where we're buying physical copies directly from the publishers at prices that they then set, because companies like Game have evaporated. Supermarkets don't stock it because the margins are too thin, and that's that we end up going. If physical is then purchased directly from the platform holder.
And the GameCube controller you have to get directly from Nintendo. I don't know if that was the same with the N64 one. It might have been.
Yes, that was.
I got one from eBay, I think so, but I guess
yes, it was
maybe resold. But
it required a Switch Online membership because it was only usable with Switch Online's library. So
could you buy it from somewhere else?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, it was directly from them.
I mean, the price, I don't know what the price of the N64 one was, but yeah, it was expensive. There's a 65, I think, for the GameCube
65
controller.
The same as the GameCube one because it's wireless. Nintendo have got money in mind, which, yes, you have to have as a business, but this was an issue I was talking about to someone earlier. How does the consumer benefit from any of this? Companies only have money in mind. It's going to negatively impact the industry. Well, this has been an ongoing conversation for decades. It's not a new one. It's just that the prices have gone up steadily as our own earning hasn't. It's more of a systemic issue, but just a case of it's an expensive hobby. They don't pretend otherwise. They've sold us cardboard, and people lapped it up. So it's certainly a reality. It doesn't make it okay, but it is the reality of what we're facing.
You say that though, like how much is Split Fiction? How much is South of Midnight?
Mm-hmm.
You know, these are Split Fiction is what, more than 10 hours, isn't it? I think supposedly,
15.
It's a. Yeah, and it's basically what you would call now a budget price game. South of Midnight is a budget price game from Xbox. So for me, there isn't. I like the look of Mario Kart because of what they've added, but for me, it's not enough new to that series to justify that price. When you have AAA, 100 million, 200 million pound budget games that are releasing for like 50, 60 quid.
Well, let's address
for me, you have to discount the fact that they've got a cheaper digital option. I don't care about that. If you want to go to a shop and buy it, it's 75 quid, which is insane.
Yeah, so let's get into that, because I think that's a valid point about companies like Hazelight and Compulsion, who are and actually I would argue Arrowhead as well with Helldivers 2, setting games like Split Fiction, South of Midnight, and Helldivers at the sort of what you would now call reduced or budget price, $34.99, 40 quid, 44.99, proves that there's a market for it. People have responded positively both to the games themselves in terms of quality, but in terms of the price point as well. But you're seeing for over a decade, sports titles and licensed games have gone through the roof in terms of pricing. You look at the cost of some of FIFA and the 2K games. It's expensive. Call of Duty, another one that's always traditionally been very pricey. There's obviously enough people buying it at this price to justify their ongoing use of that pricing. Because as you have quite rightly said, and Hein Kikamori also says as well, there is a business. They're in the business of making money. The consumers dictate whether that strategy works. So clearly, people are sort of value associating those titles with the money that they're being charged. They're willing to spend it. Now, has that trend gone that way because now there's more ways of accessing these titles? Subscription services didn't exist over 10 years ago, so they can afford to bundle Mario Kart World in with the Switch 2 at only £35 more expensive than the base console. They can afford to do that because the standalone game is being charged at that price. There's an option to get it in a different way, much like there's an option to access all the games you cited, or at least two of them, on a subscription service. So I don't know whether that's indicative of them just looking at it as being a choice thing, that there's clearly enough people still buying it at those prices to justify that they can do that. I don't know.
I think because 90%, 95% of people are going to get it in the bundle, because why wouldn't you?
Mm-hmm.
There's
not
cheaper. A massive... Well, yeah, and you've got a choice. If you want a Nintendo game, you've got a choice between that and the weird tour game, which you've got to buy for some reason.
By the way, that was the low point. I thought that looked awful.
I'm surprised. It was, what the hell?
I thought it looked awful. I thought it was going to be like, the Astro's Playroom that they bundle in with PlayStation, where you can dick about with the DualSense, and it was like a free experience. I was expecting that just as like a installed on my home screen, and you could uninstall it if you want to because of storage. To charge for it,
for free. God's sake.
Crazy. That I thought that was shit.
No one's getting that,
yeah,
surely.
no, absolutely.
But this is because I don't think they've confirmed any other games that will be £75
Correct.
because Donkey Kong they've confirmed as cheaper. So they can say we've sold whatever 10 million copies of Mario Kart World Tour, when in fact, 9,900,000 are going to have been bundled in with the console, and it will look as though everyone's accepting this new price. Let's just get on with it, and they'll be able to do it for whatever Smash Brothers or whatever comes down the line. So I think but it's also because Donkey Kong is cheaper, they could easily release the next game and put it at the same price as Donkey Kong if the small piece of evidence that they have suggests that people are really up in arms about the price. So I don't think it's going to backfire on them at all because people will get Mario Kart in the bundle. And
people are buying other titles like the ones I've mentioned at that price point and doing it in numbers that justify those series continuing.
Not 75 though.
Some of these, like the special editions ones that were higher up in the charts.
Especially can't. They're not special editions though, are they?
Well, no, because they have terrible, they have like a DLC pack and they justify.
Oh, sorry. I mean Mario Kart isn't a special.
Oh
edition.
no, not at all. No.
I think you can't start saying people pay over £100 for like limited edition copies of. Like, it's an enthusiasts thing, or you're paying for early access, which is almost like it's obviously not gambling, but you're playing on people's addiction to
getting in early,
wanting the game.
Yeah,
not
and which
great.
is where again the sub-services kind of muddy that argument a little bit too, don't they? Because of the fact that they provide access at a much lower price point, so that's their way of a secondary revenue source and to make their money back. It's fascinating, isn't it? Really, because it's almost like these publishers, as game prices have sort of steadily risen over the last even just 5 years. Actually, when you look at the increases that have happened within the gen and between gens, that they're just kind of pushing it until it breaks. There's going to be a sort of a bubble bursting, I think, at some point here.
I think we will see FIFA and the NBA 2K games and GTA will match this in terms of physical will be more expensive. Whether they also push digital, I could see them pushing digital because it's set. It's a number now that people are they're not accepting it currently, but it's a number that Nintendo have felt people will accept. So I think we will see other publishers follow it, which is what we were worried about with GTA.
Yeah.
But Nintendo went first, which is crazy to me. That you're comparing Mario Kart World Tour with GTA, and we don't even know the GTA price.
I know, yeah, that's what's nonsense, isn't it? Well, let's get into Mario Kart World. Because
we don't want to get bogged down because the pricing is easy to really get hung up on because it's a bit scary, but it's very frustrating, typical kind of Nintendo thing. But overall, it was a positive show, so we need to try not to get
absolutely.
Down
and I've held this point for a long time. People would look at me buying Mario Tennis Aces for £50 on day one as being an absolute maniac, whereas that was worth every penny to me. That was £50 well spent.
So worth 60, 65.
Yes, I unreservedly love that series. So I don't. You charge me whatever you're charging, and I'm paying for that.
Don't say that.
You go. Yeah. Well,
they're watching. Come on.
They are.
It'll be 75 now.
They're waiting. They're like, Jonathan Garrett, give us your take, and we're gonna set it. But I think there is a certain element of, if you don't think that Mario Kart World is worth that price, if you separate it from the bundle, then you might be waiting a long time, because we know how long it takes them to discount anything, both physically or digitally. But that you just wait for the price to go down, and they do eventually. Well, we have seen them eventually begrudgingly go into a sale at some point.
They go into sales digitally. Yeah.
Yes.
I think once the physical market dies, which it will, then we might be in trouble. But it'll be. I think they did a really nice job with this because they kept back the open world stuff, and like all this stuff they're showing is kind of
traditional Mario Kart.
There's some new stuff in there, which looks kind of cool. But for me, like if it had ended at the end of this segment with the traditional racing, I'd have been like, yeah, it's fine, but not doing anything innovative that I was looking for and hoping for.
Well, this is exactly yeah, this is the first, I think, meaningful upgrade to Mario Kart in a long time. So if I take it from say like Mario Kart Wii to Mario Kart 7 on the DS, on the 3DS, sorry, and then to Mario Kart 8 on the Wii U, they're not really much different at all. They had the flying and the underwater stuff in at least two of those, and seeing this now, yeah,
that stuff also doesn't actually add much because you're kind of just racing on the same track. It feels quite similar, whereas this is like a game-changing, completely game-changing feature.
This gave me actually in the closest sort of comparison I have is actually Forza Horizon. It not just in terms of the festival vibe, but the idea of being able to. It says you drive to the next track when you're doing the Grand Prix. That was at this point in the presentation. They said you
presumably that will be optional. It wouldn't surprise me if that's
if you could skip ahead. Yeah,
because like families with kids aren't necessarily going to want to do that. You just want to pick a track and stuff.
And I imagine that they're showing the Grand Prix mode rather than versus right now, so you could imagine that's still in there. And they've got the free roam mode as a separate thing as well on top of that. It just was just a nice sort of meaningful jump. I think they didn't have a new Mario Kart game last gen. I know they had the new tracks, but it was Mario Kart 8, which was the Wii U's Mario Kart. So it's been 2 gens since we've had a new Mario Kart. That's over a decade.
I have some concern about the tracks look less interesting to me because they're bigger, because they have to be so much wider for all the players. And I'm not a huge fan of the tracks in the last game, to be honest. It's all just gets a bit busy. But the open world stuff, if they can address some of the issues that open world racing games have, like difficult to find people, difficult to do the community stuff, quite hard to like get into structured races, then they'll be onto a winner. And it seems like they are really focusing on the community features with the new console, so hopefully that will be something they fix, because it's even in like Forza Horizon, it's a bit hit and miss.
Yeah, I think making it clean how you start races, because it was always really frustrating. I remember us playing Burnout Paradise online, and you join a game that you thought was a race in progress, but actually it was just a free roam, and you're waiting for the host player to go up to a traffic light to trigger it, and then everyone had to go to the traffic light to start the race. By this point, it's like 10-12 minutes in. Maybe there was a race already in progress, which adds even more time. What I'd want is that clean start, which showed, they showed the map. It starts on this race, we're going here, we finish here. And I think that cleanliness and that simplicity, I think, will serve it well. But it looked great. It looked really scaled up, and it was really nice. I mean, we've got the bet tracker going on. I did say, locked it in, that it's not going to be a cross-gen title, and I'm glad they didn't, because they did spend a lot of time actually talking about compatibility, about game sharing, and how you could game share to previous Switch consoles as well. A lot of old Switch games getting the upgrade options too. So there was a lot of conversation around that. But I think this being, and presumably Donkey Kong, which we'll get to, but presumably is also Switch 2 only, was a nice way of justifying, you can only, if you're going to get this console, which is iterative, let's make it really worth your while with games you can only get on this new thing you've bought. And I really like that. I think that's a really cool justification for the hardware.
Yeah, and I think the gap between Switch 1 and Switch 2 is bigger than like Xbox One to Series consoles. And that's why,
which is surprising, actually,
you are able to get games with like new. So the open world stuff probably would be a struggle on Switch 1. Obviously, you've got Breath of the Wild and stuff, but it's completely different engine and what stuff going on for all those players in an open world environment. Assuming it's not limited, be interesting actually to know if the player count's limited in the open sections.
Yeah.
But and the kind of destruction in Donkey Kong, you could see how that might not be possible on Switch 1. Whereas PlayStation and Xbox current gen, it was quite a while on Xbox, especially before you had stuff that really had new features that you wouldn't have expected
you couldn't
to get on the last.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? Because we came into this thinking the whole thing was going to just feel like a little incremental step, but I think they have done showing the games that they have and showing the detail and the hardware that they have, they've done a nice job, I think, of justifying the leap. It felt more of a premium version of the Switch than I was expecting it to. Just didn't expect the hardware to be that capable. I just didn't think that was going to be the conversation.
I still don't think visually Mario Kart looks that much better. But I kind of, that's what I'm saying, is they're adding like new features to games that wouldn't have been possible. But the actual graphical leap for me isn't there. But we had that problem with Xbox One to Series as well, especially if you had a One X and you went to Series X.
We're at a point where, like, you know, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on Switch looks gorgeous. It's a lovely art style. It still holds up. So the fact that it kind of just looks the same as that, I'm fine with that. It's what I want from games now that the power conversation and the leaps are going to get smaller. Just inevitably, they're not going to be as big as, or more as pronounced as they were in the past. Make it about features. Show me things that the new hardware can do that the last hardware can't, and that's more exciting.
Yeah, I think part of it is Nintendo have spent a long time refining their art style so it works on limited hardware. So they'd have to completely change the art style in Mario Kart to probably showcase what the Switch 2 can do, which they're obviously not going to do. Metroid Prime's been built for Switch 1, so it looks great on Switch 1. So there's not that much further they can push it with Switch 2 because the art style is very specific to getting the best out of.
Yeah, so then it becomes about performance. It becomes about performance and unique capabilities like the mouse aiming and the it being 4K 60. Like that's
But the third parties are the ones, like when we get Elden Ring on Switch 2, seeing how that compares to PlayStation and Xbox will be the interesting bit probably.
Yeah, for sure. Well, my highlight, as surprising no one, was the GameCube online library being confirmed. Pretty slight. That was a little underwhelming actually. That we only got 3 games confirmed for launch, but a bunch of others were teased during the announcement.
It kind of leaked before, which was a bit disappointing. But
I dodged that, so I managed to. That surprise was preserved for me still. I'm sitting here still enjoying my GameCube, but waiting for that thing to explode. So to know that this is gonna, you know, they're not going anywhere with this Switch Online account stuff. Everything's moving digital, so it's actually more likely that this will now be preserved for the foreseeable, to have access to these games. I wasn't expecting Soul Calibur to be in there. I thought that was a real surprise, actually.
I thought Wind Waker was a surprise because the Zelda games, they like to re-release as frequently as they can.
Well, they have Wind Waker HD trapped on the Wii U currently.
Yeah.
Which is odd. But F-Zero being on here with the confirmed online multiplayer was actually my highlight from the announcements. I thought that was really, really cool. I love GX on GameCube, so
in a little scrolling list of games, which I think you can assume are games that are coming in the near future, they've got Mario Sunshine in there, which is good because it resurrects it from the depths of the All-Stars collection.
Which was a concern for me, so the fact that now has a way of surviving outside of that awful collection. I saw Pokemon Colosseum was thrown in there as well, the Stadium sequel, so that's really cool. Interestingly, no Mario Kart Double Dash, but I think that's because they didn't want to step on the toes of World. World needs to be the push for them, so why would you, it'd be nonsense for them to push it. I think that would be something we get later, perhaps as a tie-in into that, but, getting Fire Emblem in there. Luigi's Mansion, just seeing that scrolling by as well was a really nice mention in there too, so that's just really cool. And no additional cost, it's all coming as part of your existing, as long as you've got the expansion pack, it comes with the existing sub. So and you get, with the GameCube games, you're getting to a stage now where the games they look good enough that you can play them now without it being like, I'm playing a retro game. Yes,
they're very playable, some of the GameCube games still. So it's it was a surprise to me when I saw people talk. Like, I'm not sure it officially leaked. I'm not sure it properly leaked, but people were saying, I've heard that GameCube, is coming to Nintendo Online. And it was I was thinking they'd hold it back based on what we've seen elsewhere with the money grabbing kind of approach. But it's the logical next step for that service, and I guess we'll get the Wii games at some point as well. Yeah, I think it's, given that we've seen price increases from. Sorry to go back to pricing again. We've seen price increases from both PlayStation and Xbox for their relevant subscriptions. No mention of any increase to price for Switch Online.
and yet a number of new additions. Now we can actually add up the game sharing, game chat, and the GameCube games being added to the expansion pack, which includes future iterations as well. They haven't separated the libraries between subs. It's not like some games are on the base subscription and then some games are only in the expansion pack. They had like N64 games are in the expansion pack only, but all of them were. And that included any games added in perpetuity. So it's just, it does make me wonder if we are going to get a little increase on that at some point. But they've given... I don't think that would happen for at least another year, because they announced the year's grace on the game chat being required for as part of the subscription. That's till the 31st of March 26. So I think at the very minimum, we're not going to be looking at any kind of increase for the next 12 months. I think for that.
Yeah, I think they'll see what the uptake is, how many people are using game chat, because I don't know if we were going to touch on that, but the C button features were kind of cool. But I think it's one of those things that in practice you would use really infrequently, especially like I can see like and the camera. Like I just don't know how many people are going to go for that. I'm sure there's some people
okay.
that would.
I think the camera will become a bit of an IR sensor fad. I think it will be like that. I don't think that's going to land particularly. I think the chat will. Just knowing from, it's not my perspective. I'm stealing this from Eurogamer. I saw an opinion piece about this where someone mentioned about how kids tend to play games now where they're on Discord playing multiple different things, but they're chatting together. I think that does tie in with that quite nicely. The way that,
but wouldn't you rather just do it on Discord? This is the thing. What they're gatekeeping you?
Yes,
on
I agree.
Shitty app.
Yeah, so I agree. I think that if, for example, you've got like a bunch of young kids that have all got Switch 2s and they're all playing Fortnite, they're going to want to do it through the game. They're going to want to have that simplicity, because I know that like my stepdaughter, for instance, has to have Discord on her phone because there's no app on the Switch for it. So she's Discording on her phone, and because there's no headphone jack on her Pro Controller for the first one, which they mercifully added to the second one. Yeah, so for my stepdaughter, it's a very wonky setup for her at the moment, using Discord and playing on her Switch. So I think, and all her friends are on Switch 1, so I think it definitely has a usage case, for sure. The simplicity of it to build that in. I don't know whether the camera will. I think the camera will be a bit of a fad. But certainly having the voice chat in there, I think, and have it be cross-game is... will be key, I think, for a lot of people. I hated the video view of it. The choppiness looked awful.
Yeah, like I
really bad. That was another real low point. It was two bits that really disappointed me, and that was the other.
That's what it's going to have to be, though, to have everyone's video going at the same time. Like it's just, and running the game. It's I don't think they showed it in the best way possible. I think they always go with their lifestyle shots, and I think the people they choose for them is always a bit unrealistic of the audience that's actually going to be able to play it. So it's hard to visualize like the actual use case. But yeah, what you said there makes a lot of sense. But I just, again, Microsoft and Sony would just put the Discord app on the console so that you could do it using the thing that you want, rather than, it'd just be a bit consumer friendly with it. It's obviously better than nothing, but it kind of just makes you wish for what it could be.
Yeah, their placement in the gen cycle as well separates them so much from in so many ways, and this is another example of that, of them kind of doing their thing. But it's interesting how that in lieu of an easier solution, my stepdaughter and her friends all used Discord, but were trying to figure it out through the Switch to make that work. So anything that lowers that barrier, just giving again people an option, I think is nice. Even if I think
it keeps people in the ecosystem, which I think is what they will be. Why they don't want Discord on there, because it means if you want to chat with me, you have to come onto Switch to do it.
Playing our games, and exactly, and it's
and you
nice
can share
to see
the game. So if you want, you can. There's all that stuff. But I saw quite a good meme which was about like game sharing and camera, which was Xbox One, and it got slated, and they had to take the game sharing out, and now everyone's like game sharing. So it's
Great,
just
yeah,
funny
exactly,
how
yeah.
people are ready for it now.
Yeah, apologies, Big Manny. Yeah, that was really bizarre. I think it was my Wi-Fi just crapped out for a second there, but we're still live, and I'll just have to stitch together the VOD when I go back to the edit. So something else I wanted to mention actually was some really good third-party support that showed up for this particular showcase. We had a number of quite high-profile games across things like Cyberpunk, Yakuza, Hitman, not Cyberpunk, Elden Ring. We also had oh god, one I've really obvious one I've really forgot. Hogwarts. We had Hogwarts as well, dropping in there, and confirmations of things like it's on the screen now. Hollow Knight still coming this year, coming to Switch 2. A bunch of third-party ports. Borderlands 4 was another one. These are quite sort of demanding titles in terms of tech, and it was a good, I think, statement of intent from them to say that no, these will work, and hopefully in a relatively uncompromised way, unlike what we've seen from other third-party support on first Switch.
I found it interesting that like that they mentioned that Fortnite was coming, which you would just assume Fortnite was going to be there. Rocket League won't be there, like isn't compatible apparently. So a bit strange to me that they have to appear. There has to be some work to get stuff like Rocket League, which can play on anything, running on Switch 2, and I would suggest getting those free-to-play games up and running as soon as possible would be quite a high priority for them.
For sure, especially stuff like Rocket League. Can I also just give a quick shout-out? We haven't talked about this yet. Fast Fusion.
I know.
From Shinen.
Yeah.
The
That's one of the few
guys.
things that makes me want to get it.
Oh, out of nowhere. And those ships look chunky, and they're split screen. Yeah. It looks fast. Between that, Reanimal reminded me that Reanimal existed, and that looks amazing. I can't wait for that. It's going to be a co-op that you and I do, I think, together. Some co-op horror is the only way I'll play horror, is with you, so I don't shit myself alone. But yeah, Fast Fusion, that suddenly skyrocketed up my list. I was like, hello.
Just a nice bit of synergy as well, because it's Switch 1 launch title.
Yeah. I don't know whether it was confirmed as a launch title, though. I think it's just this year.
Okay.
But yes, no, you're right. In launch window, certainly, it's going to be in the next 6 months. So, yeah, really nice to see that sort of variety going on. And then we had the real surprise, which was From Software working on a exclusive, Dustbloods, which gave me kind of vampire kind of vibes to it. Something a bit more medieval, which was really interesting. It wasn't clear if this was co-op or not. I mean, many of their previous games were. So you'd expect with it being on Switch that they'd
I think it's had multiplayer confirmed as far as
cool. Looked really interesting, but looked very visually consistent with their prior games. But
everyone was saying it's like a spiritual successor to Bloodborne, which is interesting. But obviously Sony have got the kind of rights to that. But yeah, certainly I think this is a lot of you. I think your highlight is either Donkey Kong or this, probably depending on which side of the fence you're on. But
just great to see them pushing that. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and I think Nintendo traditionally did a really good job of getting some very sensible third-party exclusives, especially on the Wii, which we didn't see that much of on the Switch. I'm struggling to think of many. It kind of fell back a bit more on first-party, like coming with the really high-quality games.
Or licensing first-party, like with Mario plus Rabbids.
Yeah.
They kind of licensed out.
Yeah. Whereas this is a bit more like Nintendo Evolve, where they've gone out and got an exclusive with like probably the best third-party developer that you could get. You're guaranteeing this is going to sell and this is going to be a good game. I would have thought.
And really nice in terms of viability of it being ready. You know, saying it's 2026 because we've got Night Rain coming this year from them. So rather than them overextending, I mean, they've been cranking out games over this gen, it's for them to make this viable. They've obviously the team scaled up, and Nintendo have opened up the money hat. Just what a great get for them to again justify the upgrade to the console. I think that's certainly when it's an iterative piece of hardware. I think it's a nice way of encouraging people to upgrade.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see. Currently, it's people say exclusive, and it's like exclusive for how long?
Right.
Like, is this going to be a Nintendo game that never goes anywhere else? Is it exclusive for a time. Um, I haven't actually seen. I don't know if it was on the trailer specifically, or if it's come out afterwards
Wasn't
about the
confirmed.
exclusivity or not.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, just like if it's certainly if it's Microsoft that says exclusive, you take it with a pinch of salt. So it'll be
Yeah, of
interesting
course.
to see how long it stays.
Yeah, for sure. Well, big highlight for me, kind of wrapping up our podcast, is DK Bonanza. Thought this was a great trailer. Very actually much evoking. I actually first thought Mario Odyssey sequel when I first saw the
Yeah,
with the little character with the little eyes in the corner, which was immediately jolly. Small, weird, and chubby thing got me immediately interested. And this looked really cool from a tech perspective, and again, visually very consistent with prior titles with their sort of recent 3D output. It's got a very stylized sort of character designs. Not sure I like what DK looks like. I'm still not quite convinced with him. He
oh
looks
man,
like
I said on the stream they Shreks him up. We
yeah,
were
he
talking about
looks
Shrek on the stream
yeah,
the other
he
week,
looks
and
he looks like the animated Mario Brothers movie. He looks like the new
well, that's what people. Yeah, I think that's
yeah.
why they've done it,
It's
isn't it?
sort of
And
consistent
he
with
looks like
that
that in
look.
Mario Kart. I saw on the Mario
Yeah,
Kart artwork, but that's not DK for me. But whatever.
no, he just looks a bit
Um,
dopey. I don't like it. But yeah, I thought the tech in this and the free climbing and the fact that it looks so physical. What a great way of differentiating him as a platformer, and looking like they're really leveraging Switch too in this, which is great.
yeah,
I thought this showed really well and was a real surprise actually, especially the release date, July. We're getting this a month after
yeah.
launch. It was 6 months before Odyssey
I'd
dropped. After the Switch one came out, it was October.
I'm
So,
really looking forward to knowing the limitations of this, like
hmm
because it appeared obviously, that like there he was on like a metal tower. You can understand why you wouldn't be able to like tunnel through that, but if it's like these sort of environments, can you literally do you just
tunnel
dig
through.
down and you get to a point where you can't dig anymore? Presumably, but yeah, how they make that work, because that's always a challenge in this sort of thing. Make it so it's not frustrating. You don't get to a
Yes.
sudden point. It's like, oh, I randomly can't dig any further. But um, I really like the look of that particular area with the kind of neon lights and
hmm
stuff.
It looks
Um,
ready too. It looks like it. I think it'll hit its date, and I think that's a really
yeah,
really strong title to have in the launch window. Um,
absolutely.
a good point from Big Manny here. Dustblood and Night Ren are definitely in the Elden Ring engine, which has probably helped how quickly they've come out. Yeah, because
Oh,
Elden Ring
true.
obviously
Yeah.
has been well optimized by this point now, so they're ready to iterate on it further. So just as a kind of wrap up from tonight, I I thought it was actually a really good showcase. They gave specifics, even if we didn't always agree with them. They gave specifics. They were clear. They showed titles that were exclusive, and sorry, excuse me. I think ultimately they have they've made a solid case for Switch 2 for me.
Yeah, I would broadly agree with that.
hmm
I think I at the start I felt that they showed too many like Nintendo style games and not enough. Like we got Duskblood, and some of the third party stuff they
Mm.
showed really kind of moved the. Not saying that older people can't play Nintendo games, and it's probably the one of the biggest audiences, but more hardcore
hmm
um, games that you'd expect to see on other platforms. Um, which balanced it out. But I think they could have done a better job of kind of having that balance a bit earlier in the stream.
Sure.
There were the upgrade packs or whatever they're calling them were a negative that we haven't mentioned. I again, that isn't generally something that Sony or Microsoft do anymore with
PlayStation do.
Mario Party. Fair enough because they're adding new mini games to
hmm
it, but Breath of the Wild, I know you get it with the online, but like that the app thing is just redundant. No one cares. Just it plays better on Switch 2.
Yeah.
That isn't enough reason to make people
So yeah. So on that,
pay.
PlayStation do that. PlayStation have paid upgrades of a similar style for the increased resolution and frame rate of these native games. They did it with Horizon, um, Days Gone, Last of Us, various titles. So there is precedent for that. Xbox don't. We've seen that with Xbox, either Xbox Play Anywhere or Xbox Smart Delivery. Seems to just be falling into line with that trend, I think. So
I think though, if you've got a console that's backwards compatible, supposedly, it should be. You put the cartridge in or retrieve your digital download. You should have the version of the game with the.
Yes, I'd like to know if I
or...
just put Breath of the Wild's cartridge in there without buying the Switch 2 version, would it just natively run better? May not look better, but would it just, because the hardware?
Well, it will for you because you've got a Nintendo Switch Online, but I don't know about
interesting.
Everyone else. I don't know. That was that was one negative that they showed as a positive, and I think the Mario Party one was fine because there was a lot they were adding, but the rest of it not so much. But otherwise, the games they showed, the GameCube stuff, although it's limited at first, you can be sure there'll be stuff coming, and it's something to look forward to. I personally don't like Mario Kart enough these days to justify getting it for that. And Donkey Kong, I have some reservations about the art style, and I haven't played Mario Odyssey, bizarrely. So, again, not kind of. It's not an essential one for me, but I think as the GameCube catalog gets higher and my Switch gets older and more out of date, I would be looking to upgrade, but probably not for the price. We have to say as well, your two bets coming in nicely that we've had from previous streams. So we had a bet on the price. I said 450. You said 400, and I think we'll give it to you at 400. Although I have to say, PS5 Pro dollars to pounds were bang on the same. So if they'd have done that with the Switch, it would have been 450. So I'm a bit annoyed because I'm not buying it that they didn't just go for the same currency conversion.
I got saved by the currency exchange
Donald Trump to blame for that.
Yeah.
Tariffs coming.
And and then Mario Kart not being cross-gen. That was Mario Kart.
And I mean, you could have also done the GameCube online because that you were pretty sure about that, but didn't.
I don't think that's fair to call that a bet, though. I won't take that as a bet because I was just putting that out to the universe. I just wanted it to happen, just to give me some security. It's my favorite console. I just want to know that those games are going to be there for me. And
to be fair, you've said it every gen for the last 3 gens, it's going to happen eventually.
Yeah, you got just by process of elimination, we'd eventually catch up to it. Something actually that Hein Kiko mentioned in chat earlier, I forgot to bring it up, was just the idea of eventually we might get to the Wii. That would be the next one along. So, having Mario Galaxy on Switch Online would be really cool. That game has never been HD remastered. Oh no, that's not true. It's in the All Stars collection. So we've released Mario Sunshine potentially from that. We saw that in the carousel of games. So definitely a future where that could potentially resurge and come back. Well, thanks, folks, everyone, for tuning in to System Link. And if you're catching us in our video on demand version, that goes up every single Thursday. We record the show live here on Twitch on Wednesday evenings, normally about 9 or 9:15 p.m. You can find us on all of the platforms at Burly Bird Media. That's on Threads, Facebook, Instagram, also Discord, YouTube, Spotify, etc. We also have recently, just a quick shout out to our podcast Plasma Conduit, our Star Trek podcast, which went up on Monday this week, reviewing an episode of Star Trek Enterprise. But also, we've just a week prior interviewed the legendary John Billingsley, Dr. Phlox from Star Trek Enterprise, who very kindly swung by for over an hour. It was an epic podcast we had going on there. And we have a few interesting bits lined up for the rest of April across our various shows. We've got another episode of Dulcet Tones with my good friend Stephen Murray. That's our performing arts podcast. We also have another episode of Tag and Bag with the legendary Jeff Steitzer, the voice of the Halo multiplayer announcer. That is coming up soon as well. Also another Sam Drivel has been locked, so I'm just going to drop a little tease in that. We've got one of those coming up soon. That will be going live at the end of April. and it's being filmed this weekend. So there's some good stuff. We've got Mondays are going to be our day. So Mondays are going to be our new podcast day. Also, just to throw into the mix as well, Mike and I announced Absolute Candor, which is our review podcast. We're going to be kicking that off with the second season of The Last of Us, reviewing each episode, and we'll be sharing that on our usual channels as well. Mike, where can people find you?
I'm on the xboxguide.com and at the Xbox Guide on various places in addition.
Fab, and as always, my co-host of now System Link, our gaming podcast here on Wednesday, Burly Live, our gaming stream on a Saturday, Plasma Conduit, our Star Trek podcast, and co-host of the upcoming Absolute Candor as well. So we've got a real slate between the two of us. Folks, thanks so much for tuning in. We will see you next time.
See ya.